What exactly is UPDF doing in South Sudan? Who is responsible for even their payment? Joining us tonight to throw some perspective on that is retired Major Awich Porter. He is the Director External Affairs for the NRM Secretariat, together with Dr. Charles Stolit. He's a researcher in geopolitics and security. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining me tonight. First question goes to you, Dr. Charles Stolit. You've seen what's going on, even the conversations in Parliament. The question is, aren't we overstretching the People's Defense Forces?
Well, Canary, thanks for that and a good evening. You are asking about overstretching. I think the real challenge is that there is a conceptual situation here, because both the Constitution, the policies and other legal frameworks clearly spell out how the National Army, or the UPDF in this case, can be deployed out of the territory of Uganda. Now, that really is not the issue anymore, because as we already know, this is not the first time that the UPDF is actually deploying out of our borders. For me, what bothers me, and probably what should be of concern to us, and as we saw the debate in Parliament, is that these arms, the arms of governance, of government, why can't they find harmony? Because there is Parliament, there is the judiciary, and there is the executive. There is a continued element of normative tensions, if you like, normative and conceptual tensions. Because the procedure is known. Why the continuous attitude, for instance, to ignore Parliament? Because even in the situation where the Constitution allows for movement of troops in hot pursuit, then you come back to Parliament, is also clearly known. And there are precedences. I know, for instance, in some progressive democracies, the Committee of Defense also has a hybrid committee of intelligence. If security for purposes of strategy and tactic feel that there is need for some concealment to an extent, then at least they confine in that the members of that committee. So that then the members of that committee can come to the Parliament and then sponsor that motion, or then have those concerned speak for it.
Right. So what you're saying is that there is growing attitude by the executive towards the legislature that they don't care about what they say anymore. After all, they'll rubber stamp what they say. But what is at risk here?
I think what is at risk, of course, the very first thing is that we are a country with a very small economy. We have an economy that is struggling. If for all these years, if you looked at, say, for instance, our GDP index comparatively to the rest of the world, the main one we know, for instance, by people like the World Bank, institutions like Poor and Poor, you find we have maintained the position of number 167 out of 184 countries. So this is a small and fragile economy. So the question would be, these kind of expenditures, is there really a cost-benefit analysis? Because in a question of democracy and participation, the agency of the citizens is important. Right. And where it is ignored, certain questions must be raised.
And sometimes the agencies through the Parliament, the people that do represent them. Retired Major, let me come to you. Of course, there's growing concern over the deployment of UPDF in South Sudan. We are in DRC. We are also in Somalia. The question is, aren't we chewing a little more than we can or we should?
Thank you so much, Canary, and greeting to our viewers. You asked that question, and I was waiting to hear my colleague answer, and it is good that you have asked me. The question of overstretching doesn't arise here, Canary, because in terms of human resource, the army over time has been developed. You remember in one campaign time, one of the key cardinal points in President Museveni's manifesto was the modernization of UPDF. And indeed, the president stood to that point in the manifesto. So in terms of personnel alone, the army has infantry, it has air force, it has marine, it has artillery, and all these are equipped with the personnel. You might have realized that every year, UPDF has reached that capacity where it has routine retirement. It's now a routine process that at any time, the army retires people according to terms and conditions, because the terms and conditions states at what rank and age should one go. If you have reached this age and your rank is this, you go. So by the time the army reaches a routine annual retirement and also annual recruitment, the army is very certain about its personnel. So regardless of the various deployment that is there, by the time the army UPDF takes on a task like this, don't be worried about stretching. The army has the capacity and it can do it.
The reason behind some deployments, like in DRC and now in South Sudan, the excuse has always been UPDF has a duty to protect its nationals, Ugandan nationals rather, in the foreign countries. Is this the truth, or there's a coded message here? And why can't regional governments stabilize in terms of being able to have their forces intact without having to seek support from foreign forces?
That is the truth. There's no propaganda or no hidden truth about it. UPDF has always deployed according to what you have said. Now, about other governments or regional forces not having their capacity, that is a case-by-case basis. It depends on each state responsibility. But what we know is that even in their constitutional setting or state policy, they're ideally supposed to have, and they do have. But this does not prevent the international practice of states signing agreements like cooperating between each other. Even in Europe, you have NATO. I mean, UK is a very strong army, but it still has NATO relationship with America and all these other countries like France. They have armies. So, regardless of our friends having their capability, it doesn't prohibit them from having this kind of arrangement. Okay. So for us, we do it, and we know that we do it in our best interest, and they also know how our best interest meets their best interest.
Dr. Charles Tolit, very briefly, in just 30 seconds, hasn't it become increasingly difficult to, for example, create a difference between a peacekeeping mission and whether, like, for example, seen on X from the CDF, whether we actually are defending certain leaders in East Africa?
Yeah, it is very problematic, particularly if you're looking at it within the broad governance spectrum. It is quite obvious now that the issue of due process is no longer a legitimate question for Parliament to preside over. Remember that Parliament, besides legislation, has the huge mandate of oversight. Right. And this oversight stretches to all these areas. And you know, Canary, what is worrying? I don't know. I have had a glance at the new defense establishment document. If you look at that document clearly, you find that there is actually a parallel parallel element being created against the Constitution of Uganda, because the key pillars of this establishment, you have the council, the army council, you have now the new creature that is trying to be recreated out of the court martial, and then you have the CC. Right. So that harmony is that lack of harmony is a big question, because this mission cannot be defined either as peace enforcement. It cannot be defined as peacekeeping. All right. So there are also issues with the international conventions.
Right, thanks, Doctor. Briefly, in just 30 seconds, retired Major Wich, don't you think that at some point Ugandans will need to have a say on where the forces of the country should be deployed.
Yeah, indeed.
As opposed to having these messages passed on Twitter.
No, Uganda they have a say, and it is being expressed. You see, we are 45 million people. And when we talk of a National Assembly, not all the 45 million people can go to Kololo Airstrip or Nambole. So the Ugandans the 45 million are represented in Parliament. That's why we call it a National Assembly.
Parliament was never considered. They came back to Parliament later after the deployment
under
of the forces,
the provision of the law. The first time. The law allows a particular period of time for the army to deploy, for the president to deploy, but within that time come to Parliament. So it was not outside the legal context, it was within the law. So therefore, the people of Uganda have a say, and the only way they have a say is through the National Assembly, which I said not all the 45 million can fit in that Parliament, so the Assembly is for all of us in a representative capacity. So the people have a say.
Okay.